I did it. Finally did it. I have finished The Story of the Stone, one of the great 4 Chinese classics. I finally read volume 5. So I can officially say that I have finished The Story of the Stone by Xuequin. And I'm so excited. So if you're not aware, this is the first video you're watching from me. I started reading this in 2021. I read the first 4 volumes in 2021. I was enjoying myself. And then 2022, I decided not to finish the book. I just did not read volume 5. I had read all of this, like these are like almost 600 page volumes. And this one only has 380 pages. And I just was not picking it up to finish it because I have a bad habit of when I'm enjoying a book, I just decide, you know what, I don't really need to know how it ends. And then I just don't read the ending. But no, I finally decided to stop that nonsense and I finally just read volume 5 and I'm officially finished with The Story of the Stone. And I have so much I want to talk to you guys about. So I really hope you enjoy this video. So, yeah, I'm just happy. It's 2,560 or so pages. It is a book with a massive list of characters. There's an index in the back with just, for example, the characters in volume 4, 1 page, 2 pages, 3 pages, 4 pages, 5 pages, and 6 pages, and then we have a nice convenient family tree. So yeah, it's a massive epic book, and that's what makes it absolutely fantastic. It was so much fun. It was really just so much fun. It was a real pleasure, I will say. It was a real pleasure to read this. It's a simple story, to be honest. It's just a story about Bao Yu. Bao Yu is a young man who was born with a jade stone in his mouth. And so there's, he's expected to be this great man because he's been born with just under this unique situation that he must have ties to the other world. And so you follow your main character, Bao Yu, as he, within his large family, the Jia family, J-I-A, the Jia family. So you follow him in the Jia family and their household. And the Jia family, as I just showed you with the character list, is this massive home. It has had very close ties to the imperial house. They have garnered much favor from the imperial house. They live under great prosperity. They are a very wealthy family, and they can pretty much do whatever they want. And so they have this huge household with all these wonderfully, beautifully described, not really homes, but or mansions. I already forget what, houses just connected to each other. The way Chinese homes are built, for example, with a great garden in the center, and every character has this mirage of servants, and you just see the entire interaction of this household with Bao Yu in the center and with his love story in the center. Is he going to fall in love with Bao Chai, or is he going to fall in love with Dai Yu? One of them he is supposedly fated to be with, and the other one is not. But the question is, who is he going to end up with? And so you just follow this house. But the issue is you're following this house that starts off in prosperity and gradually basically just finds themselves in great trouble, because with the legend of Bao Yu and the Jade Stone, unknown to the house and the household, is there's also this legend of these beauties that are fated to die. And so you don't really know who it's going to be, but something's going to happen. You know that the household is not going towards a very into a state of fortune. They're actually going from a state of fortune to a state of just sort of misfortune. So you just follow all these characters, and that is all this book is. It's just 2,500 pages of characters interacting with each other. And so you have servants talking behind the backs of their masters, the masters talking behind the backs of their cousins and their aunt and uncles or their nephews, or you have all these like discreet and also very indiscreet love menagerie. You have like intrigue and scheming and politicizing, and you have scandal, you have a lot of death. So yeah, you have just this like this beautiful view on just this household and how it interacts. And it's so, the thing, it's so interesting because it's so subtle. It is so subtle. It's actually quite amazing because you read this book and you're like on volume 3 and the house is incredibly prosperous. They're spending money everywhere. They're having these lavish parties, and you're like, how many pages is like this book could be 10,000 pages long. Like, where are we gonna get there? But upon reading the book, without realizing it, you've actually been interacting with that destiny, with that fate of them losing their fortune, basically. So incredibly exciting novel. Really enjoyed this. It's not a novel you should go into if you want heavy plot, if you want heavy action. It is a very methodical, slow going novel. Actually, some of my favorite scenes were when the young members of the family had their poetry club, and they were just Bao Yu with all the ladies would go into this pagoda, and basically they would have a poetry club. They would read and discuss poetry, and that was just absolutely fascinating. Like, that was actually some of my favorite parts. I just love the interaction between all the characters. And so it was just a really real big pleasure. It is a long list of characters. If you're bad at characters, you might struggle with this. For me, I don't find a necessary like huge need to be able to explicitly say who is which character, what is their relationship with the next character, etc., etc. For me, it's more about a general balance, a general interaction. You get a feeling for who's in which part of the household. This is this group, this is that group, and you have like intermingling with the groups. Eventually, towards the end, it can get confusing a little bit at times when servants are shifted around to different households. But in a whole, if you just keep that idea of like a general movement throughout the household, you shouldn't have to fret too much about individual character names. So it's just, yeah, I just absolutely love this. The thing that's interesting about this classic, so there are 4 great Chinese classics in China. Wikipedia says there's actually 6, but out of the 6, there's the Great 4. The Great 4 that pretty much everyone knows. And the thing is that they're big references for other literature and other like dramas and plays and theaters, and it was a great influence back in the day, just as much as it is today in the and whatnot. So definitely you'll see the influence of these books in a lot of East Asian culture. And the thing that's interesting about Story of the Stone is that I'll show you where the first 3 volumes say Story of the Stone by Xuequin, right? Okay. And then once you reach volume 4, it says Story of the Stone by Xuequin and Gao Yi. So the whole story with that is that the Story of the Stone is considered an incomplete book. There's a lot of hesitation as to who did Xuequin actually write the entire book? How far did he get? Was it completed before he died and there was just the rest that hadn't been published? How much of the manuscript was lost, etc., etc. So there's a lot of background behind this book that is really quite fascinating. So I'll read you just the first paragraph of the introduction. It is a somewhat surprising fact that the most popular book in the whole of Chinese literature remained unpublished for nearly 30 years after its author's death and exists in several different versions, none of which can be pointed to as definitively correct. So yeah, so Xuequin, he wrote this book, then he dies, and it wasn't published until much later. So you really don't know, was it complete, was it not? So the theory, the main principal theory that you will hear is that Xuequin wrote these first 3 volumes quite diligently and really wrote them out, and that the last 2 volumes are a little bit more interspersed. There's missing characters, maybe it wasn't edited yet, maybe he hadn't added all the details he wanted. And so the thing is that at some point the manuscript got into Gao Yi's hands, and Gao Yi created basically their version. And so there's this whole, back and forth as to what is real, does actually Cao Xueqin even exist, etc., etc. So there's this whole thing behind it, which adds to the just to the history of the book, to the interest of the book. So very, 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 very fascinating. So just that, there's a lot to go into, especially when you consider the ending of the book, which I quite liked. I'm not going to tell you what the ending is, but you have to remember that the plot of the story is about a young man who was born with a jade stone in his mouth. And so the book starts off with almost a very supernatural, very fantasy setting. And in the end of the book brings us back to that and kind of wraps the book around and actually presents Cao Xueqin, the author, as almost a character himself. So by doing that, it really makes you question what is real and what is not, and what have you just read. So really, really fascinating. I really, really enjoyed the ending. I don't even know, there's so much I want to talk about, but I didn't really know how well to present this information for you. Now, the thing is, but I'll continue on, where the thing is that I decided to read the Penguin Classics edition of this book. So for me, the idea is I want to read the most authentic, the most complete version of these Chinese classics as possible. So when I read Water Margin by Xi Naiyan, which is another of the 4 great classics, I read this in 2020. I went with the French edition because it was the most complete edition, the most unabridged. So usually in English, you get a very, very heavily abridged edition. So the French edition gave me the unabridged version, minus the 3rd volume, so minus 2 volumes. But actually, technically, there's a 3rd part. But the reason that one is not generally published is because it's not certain that Xi Naiyan, the author, actually wrote that part. So it's very, very much left out. Although it does exist in the French version, just in a different, very expensive version. But in any case, I want to read the most authentic version possible. And so this is what I found to be the most authentic. It's the one it's definitely the longest version. It's definitely the most researched version. It's the most worked version. That includes both in English and in French. I thought the English option was better. Now, the thing that I find very weird, though, is that the translator switches in between. So the first 3 volumes are translated by David Hawkes, and then volume 4 and volume 5 are translated by John Minford. And the thing that's really weird is that I don't really understand why, because there's no mention in the Penguin Classics edition, there's no mention in the introduction or anything that says, oh, by the way, we switched translators. Or the very, very first volume, oh, by the way, we're going to have 2 translators. There's no mention of that. The only reason I actually noticed it is because Bao Yu in the first 3 editions had been calling Bao Chai his cousin the entire time. And all of a sudden in volume 4, he calls her his cuz, like, hey cuz, when the entire time he had been saying, hey cousin. And that really struck me as weird. I'm like, well, that's different. And that's when I noticed that there was a different translator. So I don't really know what the issue is with that. If you were to buy a different edition of the Penguin Classics, would they all be translated by John Minford, or would they all be translated by David Hawkes? Or is it just that they switched the translators and just decided to not have the translator themselves say, hey, by the way, I'm here, let's do this. It's only, at the beginning, it gives you author bio and the translator bio, but other than that, there's no mention of it. So I did find that quite strange. But other than a very, very beginning of volume 4, where I felt there was a difference intone a little bit in the translation. Now remember, volume 4 again is where you start having the Gao Yi attached to this book. So the question is it really the translator who changed voice, or is it Gao Yi who translated voice? Is this an indication that Cao Xueqin didn't actually finish the rest of his manuscript? So that really makes for an interesting introspective. I don't have the answer to that, obviously. I'm not a scholar, I'm not a Chinese scholar, I'm not a scholar in general, so I don't have the answer to that. But it was definitely a question. It was just definitely something noticeable upon reading the book. But after reading about, a few chapters into volume 4, that feeling of like, okay, something's a little different faded, and then I was able to enjoy the book again. But it's definitely something to mention because it's, again, it adds to the history of the book. It adds to that. What else did I want to talk about? Goodness, I feel like I could talk about a lot, but all of a sudden now it's all escaped to my mind. I've talked about the translator, I've talked about the history of the book, I've talked about what I liked about the book. I mentioned that I really enjoy the ending of the book. So maybe actually that's just it. It's just to say that I really, really just super, super adored this experience. Every volume was a real pleasure. I loved, again, just the interaction between all the characters, and that really just, it was so easy to read. There's nothing complicated about the language. There's no thing about complicated about anything, because it's just day-to-day life. And what's complicated about day-to-day life? Nothing. It's just people talking with each other. But just the whimsy and the fun, and that constant background, where you know there's something supernatural and something fantastic about this that's going on, just really, really adds to the mystery and the intrigue of the book. So really, really fascinating. This was such a wonderful journey. Very happy. So with that, I've now read 2 out of the 4 classics. As I mentioned, I read Water Margin, which this one was, let's see, 1,000 pages and 1,100 pages. So this is like about 1,200 page epic. So now I have the 2 more on my shelf. So when I went back to Texas, I brought back with my copy that I have of Romance of the Three Kingdoms, and I just remembered something I do want to talk about with Story of the Stone, and we'll get back to it after this. But I did bring back my copy of Romance of the Three Kingdoms, so this is an option for my next read. This one is published by Tuttle Classics, and it's, let's see, 680 pages plus 650 pages, so about 1,300 pages. Not bad. This is very doable. So Romance of the Three Kingdoms, which, I mean, could this be any more famous? I mean, super, super famous. Like this one is actually the book that I bought before all the other ones. But when I moved to Japan, I didn't bring this with me. So I've actually owned this book for like 15 years already. I just haven't gotten to it. But yeah, this one is about, in 220 CE, the 400-year-old rule of the mighty Han Dynasty came to an end, and 3 kingdoms contested for control of China. So I am just seeing epic battles, kingdoms just like scheming and plotting against each other. Like, this is going to be so much fun. I'm super, super excited about this. Now, the other option is the only one out of all these classics where I'm kind of like, oh, I don't know if I really want to read this, but I did purchase it. It was a book I have not hauled because I wanted to save it for when I finish Story of the Stone. Can you tell by my face how heavy that was? Let me show you how preposterous this is. So the last of the 4 classics is The Journey to the West. It just says on my cover, translated and edited by Anthony C. Yu. I don't see a mention of the author. I don't know if that means the author is anonymous or unknown. But we'll find that when I buy this. But look at this, 4 volumes. And they super, super heavy because it's like this very like thick paper with quite a bit of weight. And each volume is about 500 pages or so. So we have another like a little less than 2,000 pages to go with this. Now this one, the reason I'm less intrigued by this one is because this one definitely has a lot more of a religious theme to it. The Journey to the West tells the story of the 14-year pilgrimage of the monk Guanzhong, one of China's most famous religious heroes, and his 4 supernatural disciples. This is definitely an area that I'm a little bit less excited to read. I'm not a religious person, and then reading about gods and spirits and stuff like that, it's not really my favorite thing to do. But I still think this will be great. It's just one that I'm more hesitant about reading. I'm not as excited to jump into it, although I think once I get into it, it'll be a delightful read. But this was so expensive. I cannot tell you how, no, I am going to tell you how expensive this is, but it was expensive. This book cost me $160 American dollars to buy. It was $40 per volume. So financially speaking, I feel like this should be the next one I read because I've invested so much into buying this book. I've invested, it's very heavy, and both on the wallet and just in heftiness and weight, and I feel like I should just read this because I'll be so sad I would be really sad if I never got to this. But in any case, we have 2 options for what I read next, Romance of the Three Kingdoms or Journey of the West. Let me know which one you would prefer I read first, because just for shits and giggles, let's create a discussion down in the commentary and see what I end up reading. So yeah, that's what I'm heading to next. I don't know when I'll choose and when I'll start, but that's next in the scope of reading plans and whatnot. Yeah, before I end this video, there was actually a major point that I want to discuss about the Story of the Stone. I'm really annoyed that I didn't remember at the time, but let's do it now. Story of the Stone. So Story of the Stone has other names to it. It is also very often called The Dream of the Red Chamber. So yeah, depending on which translation you get, which language you buy the book in, you will have a different potential title for the book. Now, Story of the Stone and Dream of the Red Chamber are the most famous ones, but there are definitely other ones. I know it was in the introduction for this one. Oh, here he is. So there's the Story of the Stone. There was also The Passionate Monk's Tale, which was a potential title for the book. A Mirror for the Romantic was another title for the book. A Dream of Red Mansions, and then The 12 Young Ladies of Jinling. Now, for me, which out of these 5 potential book titles, I would go for The Story of the Stone or The 12 Young Ladies of Jinling. But for me, it really is The Story of the Stone. This whole A Dream of Red Mansions, I think that's a silly title. It evokes, I don't know, for me, it evokes like eroticism for some reason. A Dream of Red Mansions, like I thought this would actually, when I first heard that title, I really thought it was going to be a very sexually heavy book. Yeah, very erotic book. I just remembered, I just thought red chambers and secret affairs going on and things like that. So for me, A Dream of Red Mansions, there's nothing that really references that so much. Yes, a dream, yes. They're in a mansion. It's a traditional Chinese household. But I don't know, that's just not very evocative of anything. But The Story of the Stone is, because the book starts off with The Story of the Stone, and it ends with The Story of the Stone. And the book is about, yes, it's about this household, but really at the center of the story is still Bao Yu. Even in the moments of the book where he doesn't really show up that often, he's still at the center of it all. And if he's at the center of it all, then the story of the stone itself, the jade stone, is at the center of it all, just because the stone is basically fate. It's what creates the story to begin with. So yeah, Story of the Stone for me is the correct title. I will never ever call this book The Dream of Red Mansions. But I do think the title of the 12 Beauties, I think it was, what did I just say? The 12 Beauties of Yinling. I do think that one is quite apt, because more so than Bao Yu, the book for me definitely is a big book about the women of the household. The women are who create the household. The men are quite, they create the chaos, and the women create the stability of the house. So yes, the 12 young ladies of Jingling. So I do think that would be a very appropriate title, but that's not really a title I've seen too many times. But yeah, so there we go. Story of the Stone. I'm so happy to have finished you. Like this just really makes me happy, and it was really fantastic. And if you're at all interested, I really do recommend this book. It's just a fantastic insight onto Chinese culture and Chinese literature and whatnot. So yeah, again, tell me if you would rather I read Romance of the Three Kingdoms or The Journey to the West, and we'll see which one I get to. They're both very uncomfortable to hold in the hand, so it'll be, I mean, you can't really do this because that hurts. So you kind of have to read like this, don't you? But you can't really put this in your bag that easily, can you? And then this book is so heavy. Plus, I mean, it's so expensive. I want to keep this in a good condition as possible. So I wouldn't want to travel with this. And it's huge. And again, you're not really going to hold it like down here because that's going to hurt the thumb part. So yeah, it's, we'll figure it out. Gosh, this has a lot of like poetry in it. And like songs, which I really don't like poems and songs in my books. I really don't. All right, I'm gonna end this video here. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for supporting me in my journey in reading The Story of the Stone. And please let me know if this has inspired you to read it yourself. Okay, so all right, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.